In the Anthropocene reviewed by John Green, the chapters Super Mario Kart, Plague, and Air Conditioning each focus on different ideas about human life and human experiences. In Super Mario Kart, Green uses the game to talk about how unpredictable life can be. Even when someone is doing everything right in the game, they can suddenly lose because of something random, like getting hit by a blue shell. The main theme here is lack of control. It shows that effort doesn't always guarantee success, and sometimes things happen that you can't really prepare for. That idea connects to real life, where people don't always get the outcomes they expect, even when they've worked hard. The chapter Plague focuses on diseases like the bubonic plague and what they really reveal about human life. The main theme is vulnerability. It shows how fragile humans are and how quickly things can change because of forces outside of our control. Green also looks at how people respond to that fear, whether it's trying to understand what's happening or reacting emotionally. The chapter emphasizes that even though humans have made a lot of progress, we're still affected by things we can't fully control. In Air Conditioning, Green looks at how humans have changed their environment to make life more comfortable. The main theme here is control and convenience. Air conditioning allows people to avoid discomfort, especially in hotter climates, and it has shaped the way people live and work. At the same time, it raises questions about consequences, like how much energy it uses and how it affects the environment. The chapter shows how humans try to solve problems by creating new technology, even if the solutions come with consequences. Overall, each chapter focuses on a different idea. Unpredictability in Super Mario Kart, vulnerability in Plague, and control in Air Conditioning. Together, they show different ways humans deal with the world around them.
Hello.
Hey guys, sorry I sound a little sick today, but today we are doing another review, this time a book called The Anthropocene by John Green. Okay, I'm going to be talking about the most important themes, in my opinion, and I've picked out 3 of my favorite chapters that are the perfect examples of this, in my opinion. First, we got the Nathan's Famous Eating Hot Dog Contest. This chapter starts on page 121 with John Green explaining that Nathan's Famous is a hot dog shop on Coney Island. According to him, Coney Island used to be a super famous spot like Hollywood, but it's not living up to its former glory these days, much like a lot of classic attractions. This chapter isn't about the shop itself, or even the hot dogs. It's about the hot dog eating contest they host annually. I had never heard of Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Contest, but it's not even about the contest either. It's like the author is peeling something back in layers, starting from generalization of the topic and digging deeper into the chapter, becoming more and more specific. The layer he peels back to is the narration that often accompanies the contestants engorging themselves on hot dogs until one of them is declared the winner. George Shea is actually what made the contest so iconic in the first place, with his quips at the contestants to make it more entertaining for people. Green accounts that introductions are normal at the beginning, but they get more quote-unquote surreal as they go on. One of the intros was about a 70-year-old man with George Shea saying something like, when we were young, we drank our coffee with milk and sugar. As we age, we drink it with milk only. When we drink it black, then we drink it on decaf, and then we die. Our next eater is at decaf. Which is kind of rude, for lack of a better word, but it's only good fun, all for entertainment, so it's fine, right? Green says, we know Shea isn't speaking in earnest, and yet his words have power. This is evident when Green moves on to talk about a Japanese man named Takeru Kobayashi winning for 6 straight years in a row, apparently eating the most hot dogs anyone had ever done in the history of the competition. He was loved by the spectators and they cheered him on at each event. That is until 2007, when Kobayashi was bested by an American, with George shouting into the microphone, "We have our confidence back. The dark days of the past 6 years are behind us." And Green says that seemed to give the crowd permission to fall into bigotry. People were telling him to go home, calling him kamikaze and Shanghai boy. It was like the crowd's attitude was just switched on to another, more negative one. Towards the end of the chapter, the takeaway Green gives us is, quote, when you have the microphone, what you say matters, even when you're just kidding. but the preposterous and the absurd can still shape our understanding of ourselves and one another, and ridiculous cruelty is still cruel. I strongly agree with this statement, and it's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite chapters in this book. I feel like this is very relevant, especially today. I'm not singling any generation out, but all of us are guilty of this. I hear and see so many bigoted jokes in real life and on screen. While I know that most of them probably aren't in bad faith, they can still very much cause as much damage as a purposely hurtful one can. And so many people hide behind it because it's just a joke excuse like that erases any potential harm it may have or will have caused. I really do believe that things we do or say, even if it's just a joking matter, shapes who we are as people and our mindsets towards others. I give this chapter 4.5 stars. The next chapter that I'm going to be talking about is the world's largest ball of paint. And I did not know America was a hotspot for the world's largest blank. Apparently it is just a joking matter, shapes who we are as people and our mindsets towards others. I give this chapter 4.5 stars. The next chapter that I'm going to be talking about is the world's largest ball of paint. And I did not know America was a hotspot for the world's largest blank. Apparently it is. Twine, rubber bands, barbed wire, corn, even paint. This chapter starts on page 245. The largest ball of paint weighs 2.5 tons, which is sort of hard to wrap my head around, to be honest. I'm not going to spoil the chapter for you, but there is something I need to share that is important to the theme that I'm trying to talk about. People come from all over the world to paint a coat over the giant ball, so everyone is painting it, making it larger and larger. Green states he often wished that his work was quote-unquote better, to be something worth remembering, which is understandable. I feel like we all want to be remembered for something brilliant we once did, to leave a lasting impact on the world, even when you aren't on it anymore, to not be forgotten. But Green corrects himself, saying, art in itself is not really about the individual, but the art itself. He says art is like the world's largest ball of paint. Quote, you choose your colors and add the best layer you can, end quote. And in time, that will be painted over by someone else's new paint. But he assures us that even if our layer gets painted over by somebody else's, and theirs getting painted over by someone else, and so on, that doesn't mean it was meaningless. Quote, you have permanently, if slightly, changed the larger sphere. You've made it more beautiful, more interesting, end quote. It feels like a reassurance and a reminder that not just one person has ever done anything themselves, and we shouldn't try to shoot for that unrealistic goal. Everything is built off of each other's ideas and creations, so there truly is no one person to credit something so big and brilliant. It is all a group effort. I'd give this chapter 4.5 stars. Last but not least, I'm going to be going over the third chapter, Monopoly. Monopoly is a popular board game I have played a handful of times, most at home, one in class. I can't remember if I was winning or losing, but I like to think I was doing pretty decently. This chapter starts at page 175. It starts off by listing the basic rules of the game and what you need to do to win, which is to bankrupt the other players. Green says the worst thing about the board game is, quote, its convoluted, self-contradictory analysis of capitalism. The game is essentially about how acquiring land is literally a roll of the dice and how the exploitation of monopolies enriches the few and impoverishes the many. And yet, the point of the game is to get as rich as you can, end quote. The history of monopolies is interesting too. Green points out how similar it is to the actual game. Hasbro, the company that now owns the game, gives all of its credit to a man named Charles Darrow, with going so far as to putting his biography in the game. But the thing is, like the world's largest ball of paint, it is not made by simply one person. The game was originally created by Elizabeth Maggie 30 years earlier. And then, of course, some college students altered some of the rules, with Ruth Hoskins discovering it and altering it further. Only then was Darrow made aware of the game and became a millionaire after presenting it to the public, despite him not being the original owner. Hasbro refuses to acknowledge the other people who have helped create the game. Green puts it perfectly. In the game Monopoly, power and resources get unjustly distributed until one individual ends up with everything. In short, Hasbro still refuses to acknowledge the land that they grabbed from Elizabeth Maggie, which was never theirs for the taking.
The first chapter that especially stuck out to me in the Anthropocene is entitled Humanity's Temporal Range. In my opinion, this chapter represents the Anthropocene as a book and as humanity itself the most. A species' temporal range is essentially how long that species has been around on Earth. Modern humans, the name our species has been given by paleontologists, have been around for an estimated 250,000 years. At the beginning of this chapter, John Green describes a time in his youth in which he embarked on a field trip to his local planetarium. This specific day in his life was the first time he had learned about the inevitable explosion of the sun that will take place in some billion of years. He then goes on to explain that worlds end all the time, just not ours, so we don't pay as much attention. Green even points out that humans are much younger than many of the animals we have driven to extinction. Because he wrote this book during the COVID pandemic, Green spent ever more time pondering and worrying about the sun exploding. However, he eventually came to the realization that people have been worrying about the very same thing for centuries, yet the sun has not exploded as modern humans haven't even been around for 1 billion years yet. He highlights that just because it will be the end of our world one day certainly does not mean that it will be the end of the world. As he states in this chapter, humanity itself is the apocalypse for several forms of life. This chapter alone was extremely eye-opening to me. As a result, I give it 5 stars. My second standout chapter happens to be the following chapter in the book, called Halley's Comet. One interesting fact about this comet is that no one knows how to correctly spell its name. The astronomer it is named after changed the spelling of his surname on almost every project he worked on. Another fun fact about Halley's Comet is that it's the only periodic comet that can be seen from our planet by the naked eye. Its orbit around the sun takes anywhere from 74 to 79 years. So theoretically, once an average human lifetime. Twice if the timing is lucky. Edmund Halley took note of the comet that he observed in 1682 seemed to have eerily similar orbits to other comets reported in 1607 and 1531. 14 years after the fact, he was still pondering about this comet. He even wrote to Isaac Newton telling him that he's pretty positive that they have seen the same comet 3 times since 1531. He then made a prediction that the comet would return in 1758. When it returned that year, the comet was named after him going forward. Halley's Comet was about the same size as the asteroid that struck Earth and took out the dinosaurs. However, it's not on course to collide with Earth. The comet gets slowly closer to our planet with every orbit though. Green writes a section of this chapter that takes a look at history using Halley's comets rather than calendar years. In 2021, humans were 5 lifetimes removed from the construction of the Taj Mahal, and 2 from the abolition of slavery in America. When you look at historical events this way, it makes time seem agonizingly slow, yet terrifyingly fast at the same time. Though very little in life is predictable or certain, you can always count on Halley's Comet to reappear. For that, I give this chapter 4.5 stars.
So you're probably wondering what the Lux Cave paintings are. Markel lost his dog. So with his friends, he went to go find it. But instead, they discovered a prehistoric cave dating to over 7,000 years ago with nearly 1,000 paintings. But shortly after discovering the cave, his friend Simon had to move due to the growing Nazi regime. So his other friend tries to protect the cave from other people discovering it. And they joined the French resistance. But sadly, Jaquel, his other friend, got caught. So, after World War II, the French government took over the cave and it became a tourist attraction. But with all the people in there and the growing carbon dioxide and oxygen, the cave began to grow black mold and it had to be closed off. So they made a complete replica of the cave with all the paintings. But happily, we get a happy ending and everyone's friends reunite after 40 years plus. Velociraptors. When you think of velociraptors, you think of a 6-foot creature, Chris Pratt, and a really intelligent animal. Even intelligent beyond humans. But that's not true. And that's all Jurassic Park's fault. Before Jurassic Park, velociraptors weren't even a very popular animal to begin with, and they weren't commonly known. Velociraptors are instead these small 3-foot creatures weighing around 35 pounds and the size of a chicken with really long tails. They're really close to chickens. They're actually really feathery instead of scaly, which is kind of lame, but that's what they look like. But I much prefer the other version. So you probably already know the teddy bear origin, but teddy bears are about tying a bear to a tree and not shooting it. So the origin comes from when Europeans used to tie bears to trees and let dogs eat them and kill them. Because as a form of revenge, because they believed that if they even said a bear's name a few 200 years ago, that a bear would come eat them, that they even started calling them the brown bear. Then he switched that to how the bears got turned into something cute, like caramels, and gummy bears, and Winnie the Pooh. Then he switches that with how cuteness of an animal makes an animal more valuable rather than an ugly animal. And he talks about that.